everyone, welcome to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about how to make pillbox hats. Now here I've got a few examples in front of me. So there's this one, which is a little bit more bridal. This one I created to do a makeup look with. We have some plainer ones here like so. And we also have this one here, which is a bit more extravagant, has got a bit more going on. With pillbox hats, you can pretty much make anything. The sky is the limit. These hats are great because they're sturdy. They're great to put things on top of, glue things on top of, create dimension. You can see here that this one is just a fabric image that I've cut out and stuck onto here. This one's obviously got a lot more dimension to it. You can see that it's all the way round, so I've considered the back and the front while making these. And I'm just going to show you a really easy way to make a really lovely pillbox hat that you can put anything on, you can put any image on. So to start with, I'm just going to set up and I'll be back in a minute. And here we go. So this is the basics of what you will need to create your pillbox hat. So I'm just going to go through everything in order and give you an idea of what each thing's going to be used for. So pair of scissors, obviously you're going to be cutting a few things. You're going to be cutting the cards, so you need a good strong pair of scissors. It's kind of self-explanatory. A ruler. So some people can freehand, that's absolutely fine. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I'm just going to show you with a ruler because I find it easier. So I have one here. Glue. So any kind of glue will work, but this I've found is really good for this kind of thing. So this is the original high-tack all-purpose very sticky glue. This glue is designed to be used for card, fabric. I do all my rhinestoning with this glue. It's really good. It's about just under £4 from Hobbycraft. So it's a really good glue to use. As you can see here, I've lost the topper to this one, so I keep a pin inside it to make sure that I can actually get any glue out. So you can see there I've just got a pin in the top of that one, and this one's got the original rubber cap it came with. Fabric, at least 2 types of fabric to do this. So today I'm going to be showing you with this lovely fuchsia satin that I've got here. Now I'm going to be showing you with satin because satin's one of the harder fabrics to work with, but you can use anything. So for example, here I've used a polka dot fabric, and you can see that that's done just as nicely as any other kind of fabric. It's really what kind of look you're going for and what kind of thing you want to make. The other fabric I have here is just a white cotton, and you can see that it's quite strong. This is more important for those of you that are wanting to work with a pale colour, because this is going to cover up the card underneath, and this is just going to make it that little bit stronger and give that little bit more structure. So this is just a white cotton. You can use anything that's white or near white, so calico, anything that's strong enough to take this kind of weight. Some people like to use denim. If you're doing a dark colour, you could use denim. So an old pair of jeans would be great for this. If you've got a white pair of jeans, even better. So I'm just going to be using this one today. A pen or pencil, pretty self-explanatory. This is just what you're going to use to draw your outlines with. Fabric scissors. Now it's not 100% necessary to have fabric scissors. It's just something I like to use because I prefer to cut my fabric with proper scissors. But if your fabric's thin enough, it'll cut with anything. Especially cottons will cut with paper scissors. So fabric scissors are not 100% necessary, but I prefer to use them. So I'll be showing you how to do that today. And then I've got a cereal box. So any old cereal box will do. The reason that I use a card from a cereal box is because it's flexible, so you'll be able to bend it to make that shape around the rim of the hat, and it's durable, so you're going to layer this up. I have more than one cereal box here today, so I've got a couple with me. It's great to have a couple because if you mess anything up or you just find that you need a little bit more strength, you need to add another layer, you've got enough to be able to do this. Open that cereal box up so you can get the brown inside, which is what you're going to be drawing on. These are great for this kind of thing. As I say, you don't need to spend a fortune to be able to do this. If you've got any old clothes lying around, they'd be fine for the fabric you wanted to use. You can even dye fabric. The sky's really the limit. In this video today, I'm only going to be showing you how to make the basic pillbox hat. I'm going to be doing a follow-up video on how you can put different things on the top of the pillbox hat. So as I said before in my examples, like here for instance, this one I haven't put much on. I've literally just cut out a fabric image and put it on the top of the pillbox hat, and then used like a textured fabric for the outside. And all I've done with this one that's different to the others is sew a big bow on the back. So really the sky's the limit on how you want to decorate these. I'm just going to show you how to basically make the blank canvas today, and then in my next video I'll show you a couple of ideas of what you could do to make it more extravagant, to decorate it. Obviously you don't need to watch the second video if you already have some ideas, but I'll just be showing you how to put things on securely so they don't fall off, and a couple of ideas for those people who really want to make one but they're a little bit stuck on what they want to make. And then here I've got some thicker card. Now this for me is all I have in at the moment, and it's not quite as thick as I'd like it to be, so I'm going to have to layer this up a couple of times. The best thing for this really is mount board, so if you've got any mount board that's great. If not, you can layer up any card. You could use cardboard for this. The reason I don't particularly like to use cardboard is because it squashes, so if you're going to glue anything really heavy onto the top of your pillbox hat, you might find that it squashes down. So I would suggest using a strong card for this, maybe thicker than a paper card. This is quite weighty. It's thicker than my cereal boxes. So this is not 100% the best for this, but it will do the job I want it to do. Mount board is the best stuff to use, though a lot of people find it difficult to cut. I also don't really recommend foam board, because foam board is difficult to cut without squashing the foam in the middle. It probably won't retain its shape, so I would say mount board is your best bet for this. It's also a good idea to have a little bin in front of you, so I just have this little box which when I'm sewing, as you can see, it's got all fabric offcuts and things in. It's got a bit of card in. It's just something so I don't have to be running to the bin every 5 minutes in order to use. It's not something that you necessarily need, but it's something I like to use. And then you need something to make a circle around. So I'm going to be using this today because this is the size that I want. So you need to consider what the circumference of the object you're going to be drawing round is. So you could use a compass for this, or you could freehand it, but I just like to use a guide. So today my pillbox hat, the top of it is going to be just slightly bigger than the circumference of this bowl, but you literally can use anything. So I'm going to start today by showing you how to make the top of your pillbox hat. I'm going to start to show you how to make the skeleton of your pillbox hat, starting with the top. So what you want to do is get your bowl or your compass or your cup or whatever you want to use and place it on here. The reason that you can use anything is basically because pillbox hats come in many shapes and sizes. You could use a dinner plate if you wanted to, though I imagine that would be quite big for your head. But if you were making one for a giant, you could use a dinner plate or a side plate maybe. It's really up to you what you use. So I'm just going to place it upside down, and you can see here that I've actually left a gap. So this ridge here isn't all the way up to the bowl, and the reason for that is you're going to need this outside area here. So you don't want to put it all the way up to the ridges of your card. You want to keep it relatively central. Obviously you only need a little bit of space, so I've only used about that much all the way around. So you don't need a massive amount of space, but just be aware when you're doing this that you will want some space in order to be able to do it. So I'm just going to draw around my bowl now and make that circle. It's just a simple circle. That's all you need to start off your process. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just draw around the edges of that circle, leaving approximately a centimetre gap. As I say, if you have a compass, you could measure this. I don't usually measure it. It's not necessarily too important what size the rim around the circle is. So long as this circle's quite perfect, it doesn't really matter what the outside looks like. So I'm just going to draw around this approximately a centimetre all the way around. Obviously, if you're not confident doing this, you could use a pencil. And I'm just going to go all the way around this now. And you can see there that I've just gone around my circle. It's a little bit rough, it's not the right size in areas. That doesn't matter. You just need about 1 centimetre or more if you feel you want more around the circle itself. So now I'm going to cut out. I'm only going to cut around the outer circle, not the inner circle. So I'm going to cut around this line here. So I'm going to cut around that line there. And just keep any bits that you have like this for later, just in case you need them, and then you can discard the rest, or you can save it to do another pillbox hat with. It really doesn't matter. Okay, so then you're going to end up with something like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut into the outer edge of this to the inner edge. So I'm not going to go past this inner line, I'm only going to go into it. So here you can see that I'm just going to cut to that inner line. So you can see there I've only made that cut right to the inner line. Now if you do cut in a little bit further, it doesn't really matter at this stage. This is like your base of the top of your hat, so you're not going to be able to see this bit. It's just so you've got a basic idea of how the shape works. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut all the way around in approximately 1/2 centimetre little flaps like this. So you can see here this little flap now, and I'm going to do that all the way around. And as you see there, you can see that I've just done all those little tabs now. They're not all exactly the same size, that doesn't matter. It's just to give you a base on which to work. As long as it goes all the way round and they're basically a similar size, you'll be absolutely fine. And these are going to be your tab that sticks the top of the hat to the bottom of the hat. So what I'm going to do now is carefully start bending these up, following this line that I've made here. So you can see there they've just started to bend up a little bit. Now it doesn't matter 100% if you get this perfect, so long as it's basically around that original circle you made, it won't matter. So I'm just folding all these up as I go around, making sure that they're starting to come in a little bit. And then what I like to do to make sure that they're really folded in is just gently get my hand and cut my hands around it. And you can see there that it started to make a cone-like shape where they're all facing downward or all facing inward, depending on what side you're looking at. So this now will be the top of my pillbox hat. For the top, that's all you need to do, and I'm going to move on to the next bit. Now, some people for the next bit will like to measure the circumference of that circle they've already made. For me, it doesn't really matter, so I'm just going to do strips. So what I'm going to do now is get my ruler and do a ruler's width from the edge. So all I'm going to do is draw a couple of strips to the edge. Now, what I like to do is I don't like to go any further than these bends here because I find them annoying to work with. So I suggest if you use the flat piece of card, that's better. I'm going to avoid you know, working this way. So I'd go over this center fold here. I'm just going to be working this way. Now, it doesn't matter whether they're exactly the same size or not because you can just keep adding them round, as you'll see in a bit. Okay, so as you can see there, I've got strips and I'm just going to cut those out now. Right, so as you can see now I've got my strips. If I need more I can make more quite easily. And what I'm going to do now is get the top of my pillbox hat and start sticking these around the edges. So the best thing to do this is to start here and just start curving it round. This will make it easier when you glue it. If you start by holding it at this angle, it'll start naturally curving itself because of how thin the card is. This will make it easier in the long run to glue it down. Another thing you can do is you can just gently roll it and bend it in on itself a little bit like this. This will give it a natural curve as well. This will just make it a bit easier to work with once you start gluing it down. So you can see there that naturally now it sits curved. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just put a bit of glue on each one of these little strips. And I'm just going to put a little bit. You don't need a massive amount because this glue is really sticky, and you can spread it a little bit with a nozzle on each one of these strips. And I just like to start with a little bit, so I've not gone all the way around, I've just started there. So what then I'm going to do is find where the start of that glue is and just put it flat on the table and start curving it round. Now the reason I put it flat on the table is because it'll be easier to hold it down in the right place so the top of your hat won't slip inwards. And you just want to press all those little tabs onto it. Now this is going to be the longest part of the process, is waiting for the glue to start bonding, because this glue doesn't bond straight away, so it takes a little while, which means you just have to keep pressing it down and waiting for it to bond onto that piece of card. Now sometimes I've been known to use hair grips to do this, or something to hold it in place, but today I'm just going to be patient and sit and hold it for you so I can show you how it starts to bond. This is the reason I like to do this in small stages, is because it's generally easier to get it to bond in small areas and then build up. The more card you get on this, the easier it will bond. Obviously if you let go of it too soon it will pop off, but the glue carries on working, so you need it to dry to some degree before it's really going to bond onto there. And what I like to do, as you can see me here, is I just like to keep squeezing those little tabs and making sure I'm pushing it onto the table to make sure this part is flat to the table. So you can see here that the top is flat to the outside. And now that's started to bond a little bit. It's not going to stay for too long if I let go of it, but I can just add a bit more glue now, approximately to where the edge of this piece of card is. And then I can sit it back on my table and curve it round again. And just keep pressing that in. So you can see here that I'm just pressing it in to make sure that it starts bonding. You can see on this side it has already started bonding. It doesn't take a massive amount of time. This glue's non-toxic, so it's not going to give you any problems touching it with your hands, which is another great thing about this glue. I find a lot of glues that have this sort of high tack quality can be toxic, whereas this one isn't, so that's always an upside. So you can see here that I'm just pressing it in, making sure that it bonds. And you can see that this singular piece of card isn't going to go all the way round. That doesn't matter, because you're just going to keep adding it round. So I'm just going to add the last bit of glue onto here now, where the bottom of this card is. So I've just added it on, and I'm just going to press the last edge round. So you can see I'm just pinching it on. Now I personally find that the more you manipulate this glue, the faster it will stick. So if you want to leave it, you can do, but it will stick faster if you keep touching it, because it'll get used to being bonded to the surface you're bonding it to. So you can see now mine's got a lovely bunch of grapes at one side. We're not going to be able to see that by the end, so don't worry what it looks like on the outside. Okay, and you see there that it's started to bond its way onto the side, and you can see that that's the top now. I can see a little bit of a gap. That doesn't massively matter because it's going to get covered anyway. So long as it's bonded well to the little tabs that you made, it should be fine. So I'm just going to start with now my next piece of card. While that's bonding a bit more, I'm just going to curve this round with my hand again, just to start off that curving process. This is going to make it want to ping off your hat less. What I'm going to do with this piece is overlap it slightly, so I'm going to start here as opposed to here, just so it's completely overlapped and completely covered all the way around. So what I'm going to do is cover this area in a bit of glue. It doesn't need to be a massive amount. I'm running out here, so I'm struggling a little bit. I've got more on the way. And then I can just get it there and bond it onto that last piece of card there. And as I say, the more you press this, the more it will bond together. So you can see there that I've started to make this shape. And I'm just going to glue around the last of those tabs now, just to get this all stuck down. And I'm just going to curve it round onto the last of those tabs and keep pressing it to make sure it bonds. And you can see now that the hat's started to become completely covered. Now you can use PVA glue for this. I find that this particular glue works really well. It bonds quickly, it'll hold everything in place, but you can use whatever you've got to hand to have a first go with. It doesn't really matter. Some people like to do this area in Pritt Stick because they find it easier. I just find that this glue stays stuck for longer. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover this area here under the curve, under this bit in glue, so this bit can stick down onto it. I'm just going to cover this area here with a bit of glue. You can see I'm just making a wiggly sort of shape with the glue to about there. And then I'm just going to keep on pressing it down so it's starting to bond to the outside of the last piece that I did. Now really how many strips you add is dependent on how heavy or how extravagant you're going to make this. At this point in time it's still a little bit bendy. It's going to curve in a little bit like you can see here, so it's not going to retain its shape all too well, which is why I like to add more layers just to make it so it's a really strong nice shape. So you can see there that it's started to bond now and I've got a full circle. You can see what it looks like from the top. And I'm just going to add yet another layer of card, and I'm just going to keep adding these layers of card till it feels thick enough. It's really down to your own personal preference how strong you want it to be. Right, now I'm at this stage where I've got the last bit going on. I just like to put the last layer of glue along that strip there. So when you close it, you're not going to end up with glue all the way around here that you're not going to use. So I'm just going to press it on now. Now don't worry if, like me here, you find that the last layer or one of your layers is slightly higher than the rest of it. That's not a problem. You can either cut it off or leave it. It doesn't really matter. I'll show you how to do that once it's dry. But there you have it. So this with the 5 layers on is much thicker than it will be, a lot less bouncy. I'm pressing it to the same degree I pressed it last time. You can see that it's not really moving as such. It's got a little bit of give in there, but it's not really bending the way that it did before. So now that you've got this shape, you're going to put this to one side and leave it to dry. If you find that your last curve is pinging away, you can add paper clips or hair grips to hold it in place while it dries. And I'd leave this maybe half an hour to an hour to let it fully dry. Now next up, we're going to get our mount board again. And for this, depending on the thickness of your card, you're going to need approximately 4 to 8 circles. I'm going to do 4 today. And what I'm going to do is just get my bowl again, so all my circles are the same size, and I'm just going to draw 4 circles on there. You don't need to add any round the edge this time, so you just draw the circles. And I'm just going to draw 4 onto here. So as you can see there, I've drawn 4 circles. Now if you notice here, I've had to overlap a little bit because I've not had enough space. That just means that this one I'm going to cut a tiny bit off is going to be my lower bit, so you're not going to be able to see it. It's not really an issue. So I'm just going to cut these out now. As I say, depending on the thickness of your card, depends on how many you want to layer up. If you only have cereal boxes, then you could just use that and layer it up loads and loads to do like 10 layers, 6 layers, whatever, until it's thick enough for you. You can just use cereal boxes or anything like that. So I'm just going to cut these out now. Right, so I've just cut my 4 circles out. As you can see, this one I had to cut a little bit off here. That's not going to matter. You can also see that they're a bit ragged around the edges. Again, your fabric is going to hide that. Maybe for your top one, you choose the best out of the ones you've done. And if you have to, in certain areas, trim it down. So you can see here, I can just trim this small area down just to make it a little bit better. And I can just keep going in and just trimming any areas down that look rough, like so. So that's probably my top one because that's probably the best out of 4. But it really doesn't matter because when you fold your fabric around these, you're not going to really be able to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue 2 together and the other 2 together, but I'm not going to glue all 4 together. So if you did 10, you'd glue 5 together and 5 together. If you did 6, you'd glue 3 together, 3 together. You get the idea. So what I'm going to do is use my glue again, and I'm just going to go round. And loosely glue them together. Now you can see that the glue, before it dries, slips around a little bit, so you can just tweak that a little bit, make sure that it's all together. You can put these under a book to let them dry, but really it doesn't matter. They don't have to be so solidly glued together that you couldn't pull them apart, because this glue will bond really strongly, and as I say, it's all going to be covered in fabric anyway, so that's going to add more structure, strength to your final product. So that's 1 with 2, and I'm just going to do the other one. So you can see that I've used my best circle on the top here, but I'm not going to glue these 2 together just yet. So what I'm going to do with the one with my better circle on the top is put that to one side and take the other one. Now my hat's had a little bit of time to dry. You can see here that it's starting to look more like a pillbox hat. You can see that it's quite solid, you can hear that. And what I'm going to do is glue these 2 circles I've just glued together onto the top of here like so. Now if this isn't dry and you press too hard, the middle part is going to pop into the rest of it. So just use a light hand when you're doing this to stick it on. And all that's doing is strengthening your base up a little bit to make it easier to work with, and make it a bit more sturdy when you're gluing other stuff on top of it. So now this could take this glass bowl quite easily. It's not causing it any structural damage. You can just see how that extra bit of card has made it that little bit stronger. Now I'm going to leave these two to dry for a minute, and I'll be back in just a minute. And we're back. Okay, so these now have had about 20 minutes to dry. They don't need to be 100% dry for this, just enough that when you're now adding the fabric, it's not going to affect the structural capabilities of it. As I say, it's not 100% dry. It's just dry enough now that it's bonded together a little bit and I can work on it. So what I'm going to do first is put this to one side, and I'm going to take this piece. So this piece has got my good circle on the top. If there are any edges, you can trim around them a little bit just to make it that little bit neater. It's not 100% necessary. And what I'm going to do is take this bit now and put the fabric over the top. So I've got my fabric spread out, and it's shiny side down. So as you can see, this is the good side and this is the inside of the fabric. And what I'm going to do is get my bowl again. Now with some lighter colours, you are going to want to do this with dressmaker's chalk or something lighter. I'm just going to use a pen. So what I'm going to do is now draw around my bowl. Now be aware when you're doing this, the fabric will move. So this is just a basic idea of what kind of shape you're going to get. So you can see there that my circle isn't perfect when I move the fabric. You can see that it's not quite perfect. That doesn't matter, because for this it's not necessarily that you need it to be perfect. So I don't know how well this is scanning on camera. Maybe if I move my light over it, you'll be able to see it a bit better, or move the light away. Yeah, you'll be able to see it better now. And what I'm going to do is give myself approximately 2 inches now around the edge of this circle that I've just drawn, in order to give myself enough space that when I cut it out, fabric tends to shrink. So you want enough space to be able to fold this around. So I'm just roughly drawing around the edge of this now. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I've got a basic rough guide of what it's going to look like. Again, I'm going to move my light away so you can potentially see a bit better. You can see here where the edge of the circle is and where the edge of the fabric is. So it's just like a big circle that you've drawn around that initial circle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut out roughly around the edge of this big circle. Now before I do that, the reason that I've used satin for this is because satin is probably one of the harder fabrics to do this with, because it can fray, because if you put glue on this, you're going to be able to see it through. So I'm going to show you how to try and avoid that. So you can see there's my circle. It's a rough shape, it doesn't need to be perfect. And what I'm going to do from there is get my circle that I didn't glue to the rest of the hat and just place it down on the top there, and just pull this in to check how far in it's going to come. So I can see there it comes to roughly the centre of my circle, which makes it just about perfect for this. If it comes too far over to this side, you've got too much fabric and you need to trim around your circle. So I can keep folding in here to check how far that's going to come in, and I can see that it's just about right because it all sort of meets in the centre here. You will get more used to this the more you do it. It's a trial and error process. If you mark glue where you can see it, obviously you can cover that up with decoration that I'm going to show you in the next video, but for now I'm just going to be dealing with this. So what you don't want to do is glue this side here, because this is the side that's going to be touching the fabric where you can see it, where it's going to be visible. So you want to kind of avoid gluing that area. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to place it in the middle of my fabric and add glue around the other side. Now you will want plenty of glue for this to make sure the fabric sticks. I like to do this in small increments, as I did with when I was wrapping the card around it. So what I like to do is bring the fabric in and start pulling it round and folding it over like so. Now with this, you're going to have to be patient because it does take a while to bond the fabric to the glue, and you need to try and pull it tight so this edge stays flat here. Now the other thing is, if you pull it too tight, it will start sliding the fabric all the way around your template, so you don't really want that to happen. And what I can do now that that's started to bond is add a little bit more glue and just glue it all the way around. Obviously if it moves you can push it back into position with your thumb, so I'm just holding my thumb against this. So I've gone a bit further around with my glue now. If I bring it a bit closer you might be able to see. And then I'm just going to keep folding the fabric over and bunching it into the middle like that. So you can see here, this process isn't the easiest thing in the world. If it looks a bit rough, don't worry, I'll show you how to fix that. But for now, this will do the job I want it to. So you can see here that this takes much longer to dry than it would to bond to card to card. So you just need to basically just keep holding it in the right position, pulling it in where it needs to be pulled in, and just keep manipulating that glue to dry. So what I like to do is push my finger over the areas where I can see the glue coming through, because that just activates it a little bit, makes it dry that little bit faster, and it starts to bond like this. And as you can see now, if I lift it up, what it looks like on the other side, I haven't got any glue on the other side, so be aware of if there's any glue on your table that might affect it. And now I can just carry on round so I can add more glue. Don't wait for this to dry 100% before you glue the entirety of the fabric round, because you want to be able to manipulate it into the place you want it. So you can see here now that I'm just pressing it all in together. Now I've got it all folded into the center, and that's going to start to bond. So I can hold that with the one hand, and I can see here that it's started to come out a little bit, so I can just pull that fabric round that little bit more just to make sure that it's starting to bond to the right shape. This isn't the easiest thing to get right, so don't panic if you get it wrong. Like I say, I'll show you how to fix that as well, but the more you get used to it, the easier you will find it. Sometimes you don't put enough glue on and pieces of fabric will start to ping away. You can just glue them down once it's completely dry. So you can see here now that I've got this kind of shape, and this is the inside of my hat. Now I want this to dry 100%, so I'm just going to leave it to dry. And when it started to bond to the point where you can lift it up and it's not really moving all too much, you can check the outer side and you can see that that's nice and flat. The inside looks a bit like that. And obviously if you can see it starting to come away, you can keep pressing it back down, but essentially it will stick. You can add more glue over the top and it will seep through the fabric to make it stick to that card a bit more if you need it to. And I'm just going to let that now completely dry. Now for this bit, because I've got these markings around the edge of this, I'm going to be using the white fabric first. So you can see here that this little bit here is taller than this bit. So what I can do is just get my scissors and carefully go round to cut it to the same level as the rest. So I'm just cutting it off in little bits to make sure that I'm just cutting off that bit that's taller than the rest. Obviously it will depend on how dry your glue is, how well you can do this. If you want to let it dry 100%, that's probably best if you've got a really long bit. But you can see here it's retained its shape, and you can see here how deep it is. So let's say you decided that you wanted your pillbox hat to be deeper. You could, when you make these bits to curve round, you could double up the width of the ruler and then it would be this long. You could do a ruler and a half. You could measure out a particular increment that you wanted it. This pillbox hat's quite shallow. It's not quite up to my knuckle when I stand my finger in it, so it's going to be quite flat to my head. So you need to consider that when you're doing it, and obviously you need to consider how wide your circle is, because it is slightly wider than the original circle because of how many thick layers you've put on here. So they are all things to consider when you're doing this, but there is no right and wrong. You can make any kind of shape. I made one that was a heart shape. This one was a bit more complicated because I had to draw my heart out, or draw around a heart shape, and then I had to make it so the areas here bent inward. But you can see that you can make any kind of shape with this. Really, the sky and your creativity is the limit. I suggest making a circular one to start with. So with this, what I'm going to do now is, because I know that I used a ruler width around this area, I'm going to use my ruler again to measure out how much white fabric I'm going to need to do this. So again today I'm going to be using the white cotton, and this is because white cotton is nice and sturdy As I said before, if you're using a pale fabric to cover your hat, you're probably going to want a pale cotton or similar to be able to make sure you're not going to see any of the cereal box through your hat. So I'm just going to follow this edge of the fabric here, and what I'm going to do is put my ruler there just as a general guide. Again, this doesn't need to be perfect because you're going to glue it round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it from probably just over double the width of the ruler, and I'll show you in a minute, and I'm just going to cut it to quite a long strip. Now the reason I don't bother measuring it, you can measure the circumference of the hat, but I just find that takes too long, so I'm just going to cut a strip longer than the circumference of my hat, just by eye. I don't really know how much that is, so I'm just best guessing it. Again, this can be a rough guide. You can go all the way to the end of the fabric if you want. So you can see here now I've got this nice long thick strip of fabric, and when I put my ruler on you can see how wide that is. So you can see that it's much wider than the ruler. I wouldn't worry too much at this stage how wide it is. Obviously it wants to be like a longish strip so you can work with it, but you can cut areas off. You are going to be folding this around both edges, so you need enough to be able to fold in on both sides, so just be aware of that when you're cutting it. So what I'm going to do now is take my hat, and I'm just going to look at how much fabric I need around the hat. So obviously I've cut this much longer than I need it, so I can roll it round to where the fabric meets the fabric and just cut it off. Now this is great for me because I've actually got enough here to do 2 layers, so again I can roll it around the fabric and I see that I've got enough to make 2 layers of this. So if you want to layer up this to make this here, you can see through it a little bit, to make this completely opaque you can add more than 1 layer. I'm not going to bother doing that today because I don't need to, because my fabric's dark. But if you do, you can just keep adding layers of this white or cream or whatever you have to hand, just to make it that little bit thicker and make this less see-through. So I've got my strip here, and all I'm going to do is glue it on. Now what I like to do to make sure that you're not going to get glue on this area where the satin's going to touch or where your fabric's going to touch, I'm just going to be gluing the inside and the top. So what I'm going to do is start with the inside, and I'm just going to go around the inside of my hat and add some glue around, all the way around the inside of my hat. So you can see there that I've got a layer of glue around the entire inside of my hat, and what I'm going to do now is put it in around the center of the fabric and start folding it in. So you can see here that I'm folding it into the inside of the hat onto that glue, and I'm just going to keep bringing it round and folding it in. Now this bit you don't need to worry about if there's any rough edges, because this is going to get covered by another layer of fabric, or another 2, 3, 100, whatever, however many layers you want to do. I'm just going to fold it in. So you can see here, now you can see where it's wrinkly here, I can just straighten that out by pulling it. So you just want to be aware of that when you're doing this, make it all nice and straight at the bottom, otherwise you are going to end up with wrinkles on the bottom of your hat. And now here where it overlaps, I'm just going to add another bit of glue onto the top of this fabric here. Now be aware when you're sliding it down into your hat, if it's not wide enough here, it's not going to fold to cover. This is why I make it extra wide. You can see here that I've just folded that bit over as well to meet in the centre, and I'm just again manipulating it with my hands to get that glue to bond, to make sure that there's very few wrinkles. It doesn't matter if you have a few. Now as you can see, this hasn't fully lined my hat, so you will end up with this on the inside. I'm going to show you on the next video, probably tomorrow or the day after, how to line a hat. For this you are going to need to be able to sew or use a sewing machine. It doesn't matter whether you can hand sew or use a machine for this. It's not 100% necessary to line your hats, because obviously they're going to be this way up, so they're going to be face down. You're not going to be able to see that once it's against your head. But if you like to have a fully finished product, or you're making this as a gift for somebody, you might want to think about lining the inside. So for now what I'm going to do is leave it like that, and I'm going to line it when it's completely dry tomorrow, and you'll be seeing that in the next video. So what I've got now that that's started to bond is I'm able to put it down like this, and I can start gluing it into the middle again. So what I'm going to do is fold this fabric back so I can see what I'm doing onto this circle, and I'm just going to glue onto here and give myself a strip of glue so it looks a little bit like that. You can see that the glue's not all the way into the centre, and I'm just going to do that all the way round. And then much like with the top, you're just going to fold this in like so, and just make sure that it's as flat as you can get it. And then this edge that's poking out needs a little bit more glue, so I'm just going to add a little bit more here just to make sure that that edge is completely flat as well. And then I'm just going to keep manipulating it all into the middle like I did with the other side. If it doesn't go all the way to the middle, it really doesn't matter because these are the insides of the hat. So you can see here that I'm just pressing down, making sure that it's all going to bond together. So this fabric is basically just to add a little bit more structure. You don't really need it for this because this is already one thick piece of card. You could add a layer of fabric to this if you wanted to. You could add a layer of foam if you wanted the top bit to be quite bouncy or quite thick. Really, it's up to you, whatever you feel comfortable doing. This is just the way I like to make them. You'll find your own way that you prefer to do it. So this is just a basic guideline on how you can do it, and you end up with something like this. So you can see now that these are different colours. If you wanted to use a different colour for the top, you could do. You can now see how it's going to start to sit on the top. So you can see here that that's what the top is going to look like when it's on top of the pillbox hat. You can see that my top is slightly smaller than the rest of the hat. If you wanted to make this top bigger, you could draw around your hat itself to make sure the circle was the same width as the hat in its entirety. So that's also an option. I don't really mind the tops of my hats being a little bit smaller, so for me it's a non-issue, but for some people they will like to do that. Now with your second layer of fabric, or your outer layer of fabric, you're going to want to leave a small area where you can fold it in on itself to make, you can see that this edge is still rough here, but to make it a nice flat edge you're going to want to fold it in on itself. So I'm going to do the same again with my fuchsia satin. I'm going to find the edge of the fabric and I'm just going to cut a strip. Now because I'm so used to doing this, I'm not going to use the ruler again. That was just to show you. I'm just going to guess it by eye, but obviously be aware with fabrics that are shiny like this or thin fabrics that it is going to move. It's not going to be perfect, so you might want to cut it a little bit wider than you did before. That's fine. I like to just cut a full strip off my fabric and then find out how long it is. So you can see here that I've got my strip of fabric inside down again, so you can see that's the shiny side on the outside, and I've got the inside facing me. So what I can do now is basically do the same thing again. Make sure that it's long enough so I can roll my hat round into it. But this time I'm going to leave about this much, so I've got some to fold over in order to make a clean edge. Now for some people it's not going to bother me because I'm only doing this as a tutorial, but for some people some fabric is a little bit creased, so you can see here there's a little bit of a crease. That will pull out to some degree when I put it down, but you are still going to be able to see it. So if you really don't want that creased effect, you can get rid of it by ironing the fabric before you use it. So what I'm going to do is start from the inside again. And if anyone's noticed this, this is called the selve edge of the fabric. So this is the rough edge, if you can see here. This is the rough edge of the fabric. I like to make sure this goes inside my hat if I'm going to use this, because this, if it's on the outside of your hat, it might show, and you don't want that to happen because you'll be able to see all these little dots on the rough edge of the fabric. This is when it's manufactured, these marks happen. So it's a good place to measure to cut a straight line, but it's not so great if it shows in your work. So what I'm going to do again is start the same process. So I'll put my hat on the top and I fold it in to see how far it's going to fold in, and I can see there that that's about right. So now I'm just going to add another layer of glue onto the inside again like I did before, So you can see there that I've just lined the inside of my hat with glue again, and I'm just going to put it on there face down, and I'm just going to start bringing this in. So here I have this shape now, and I've got this long bit that's dangling off the edge, and what I'm going to do is just fold that in like so to give it a nice clean edge. So you can see that I've just folded part of the fabric in, and then I'm going to bring it round here like this, and I'm just going to add glue into this area here, and I'm just going to fold this area on, and you can see here now that I've got a nice clean edge. Now this is the most fiddly part, is probably adding this last layer of fabric, because you do want it to look a bit more clean than the rest. The glue doesn't dry so fast that that's impossible, so you can just keep manipulating it. As it dries, it will make this easier, so you can just keep pulling the fabric out and flattening it off. You can see that this area still has no glue on it. You can still see where that little fault line is that I didn't bother to iron out, so you need to be aware of that when you're doing this. Now what I'm going to do at this stage, because this fabric is quite difficult to work with, is I'm just going to leave that to bond a little bit, so then I can manipulate it a little bit better, and I'll be back in a little while. Welcome back. So it's been about an hour now. I've just given this some time to dry. What I did while it was drying was just pinned the fold in here, just to give it a bit more of a chance to hold its shape. So you can see that it's not perfect at the bottom, it is still a bit wrinkly, but what you're going to do now is pull the top in to start making the shape at the top, so it starts pulling it straight. So I'm just going to remove this pin, put it in my pin cushion here, and then I'm just going to press around this edge to check that it is bonded in areas. It's mostly bonded now. I mean, if you follow my next tutorial on how to line your pillbox hat and sew the top down, this won't be a massive issue for you. Otherwise you can go back in with some glue and just keep tweaking it. So what I'm going to do now is just put this pin on the inside here like so, just to hold this in place. So what I'm going to do now is figure out how far it's going to fold around the top, so I can see here that again I can grip all the fabric. This is sort of a good top base to work on. So I'm just going to fold all that fabric out to reveal the inside, and I'm just going to now put a thick layer of glue on this to hold the top. Okay, so you can see in there that there's a layer of glue around all of it. Now I am running out of glue, which is what was causing me problems in the first place. So I'm just going to start folding that fabric in onto the top now, and just start folding it onto that glue and pressing it down so it starts holding on there tightly. Now my biggest problem at the minute is I don't really have much glue left. As I say, I've got some coming tomorrow, so I'm having a few technical issues with getting mine to stick, but if you put plenty of glue down you should be able to resolve that. And you can see there that it's starting to all come together now. If I turn it round you can see how it started to fold down. Now what I like to do at this stage to help me hold it down is get a few more pins and just pin the fabric in. Now any pins you use, just be aware they are going to get glue on, so I have pins that have already got glue on from a billion other projects that I'm not really bothered about. So now, because I've got the pins holding the centre for me, I can start pressing other areas down to try and get it to stick. You can see now I can check all the way round where it's starting to come away and just fold it in. Now like I say, if you are going to sew the top to this, which I recommend you do rather than just gluing it, which I'll be showing you on the next video, you'll be able to get this to sit flatter, which some people won't need to because you'll be adding extra stuff on. It won't matter, you won't be able to see this. So now that I've got it a bit tighter, I'm going to put a couple more pins in. And now I can just let that dry. So this is the stage you want to get to, really, where you want to now let your components dry. So you can see the top here is devoid of all glue. If you're finding it really difficult to cover in fabric, you can cut the fabric down so you're working with a thinner strip. Some people like to use a wide piece of ribbon for this area here. I like to be able to get it all the way to the middle so I can pin it all together or hold it all together in one place. But essentially that's now covered in fabric. But I'm now going to leave this overnight to dry, and I'll see you tomorrow. And we're back. So it's been overnight now. This has had chance for all the glue to dry properly, and what I'm going to do now is take the pins out the top. You can see now that this has mostly all bonded down. Now at this stage what you could do is re-glue areas down that don't look quite tight enough, where the glue hasn't quite sat. So I'm going to do that a little bit now with this. I'm not going to worry too much because in the next video I'm going to be showing you how to sew the top to the bottom. So all I'm going to do is open out the bit that hasn't quite glued down, get my glue and just glue that down. Like so. I can use pins again to pin it back into place. Right, so essentially you'll end up with something like this. This is the inside. It looks a little bit messy. Like I say, you can glue it all down, but I'm going to show you how to line them and sew the top to the bottom. So for me it's not necessary. What I'm going to do is just cut this tuft off at the top. So I've just cut that excess off a little bit now. I've not cut too much off. I can now just start trimming away a couple of little bits that are going to make the top stick up. And then I can glue these back down if I wanted to, like so. And again, you can do the same with the inside. So you could glue this bit down. For me, it's not necessary because I'm going to line this and put the top on by sewing it down. But all you do from here is trim this down as well. So you've got less fabric impeding how they're going to sit together. So I'm just cutting a little bit of that away. So you can see there that I've now cut it down a little bit more. I can keep trimming if I want to make that flat. And then all you're going to do is glue this on the top like so. So for this I'm actually going to use some other glue because I've completely run out now and I'm just waiting for another parcel to arrive. So I've actually got some glue. PVA glue will be fine for this if you haven't got any of the high-tack stuff. It might not stick as well, but being as I'm sewing mine down, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just pouring that glue on the top there. And I'm just going to stick it down like so. Now what you want to do once you've got the top stuck to the bottom is find something heavy to put on the top and leave it to dry. And there you have it. There's your pillbox hat. If you want to find your own ways of attaching it to your head, you can do that. If you don't want to sew it down and you don't mind it being a little bit rough here, you don't need to watch the next video. But if you do want to find out how to now perfect this, I will be posting another video on how to perfect this in a couple of days' time. So you'll have that option as well. These will be numbered on YouTube as part 1 and part 2 of pillbox hat tutorials. But that's essentially all you need to make one. And if you're going to put like a trim around this edge, it might not be necessary to sew it down. If you want it to be a little bit more rough, you can leave it a little bit more rough. If you're going to cover the top in a big ornament or rhinestone the whole thing, it might not be necessary. I do suggest that if you do want to just glue the top, you glue around all the edges as well, trying to avoid getting glue on the fabric as much as possible. As you can see here, due to some issues last night, mine has actually got some glue on due to the fact that my glue was running out. It was just squirting everywhere, but I can cover that up, so it's not a massive issue. I'm just going to put that under something weighted to dry now and leave it to dry for another 24 hours or so. So I've got my heavy object, I've just put that on the top there, and you will end up with something like this. So you can see here that I haven't sewn any lining in this. This fabric is easier to work with because it's a cotton, a printed cotton, so it was easier to work with than the stuff that I've just worked with, because it's a bit more solid, it's a little bit less movable. And you can also see here that this hat, like I was saying before about drawing around the hat itself to make the top bigger as opposed to a smaller top, this hat, the top is the same size as the entire hat, so I don't end up with a smaller top. This one again, all I've used is a fabric image that I cut out to do the top piece, and then I've added some love heart pins just to make it look pretty, and I've sewn a bow onto the back. In the next tutorial I will be showing you how to add this tulle to the front of your pillbox hat to make it look a little bit more weddingy, a little bit more occasion wear. I'll also be showing you how to glue things onto the top, and I'll be showing you how to stitch that down and give it a lining like this. So if you don't want to follow the next tutorial, what you can do, like I've done here, is I've added a bit of ribbon on the sides, I've glued them on the inside, and obviously I've stitched around it for this, but you can see here that they've just been glued on the inside. These you can put hair grips or bobby pins in to hold the hat to your head. The more ribbon that you add, the easier it will be to attach it to your head. This one was just a showpiece for photographic purposes, so I didn't need to put too many on. But you can pretty much do whatever you want from here on in. If you now feel like you're confident enough to do this without any further help, please go ahead. So I've got another example here. This one I've just glued an orchid to the top that I've spray painted, and I've just added a little lace to the back, and I've put a rhinestone in the centre of each of those pieces of lace. Again, I will be showing you how to do that. You can see that this one was actually for my wedding, so it's actually got some hair grips on it already. And you can see that this one's probably smaller in size, so you can make them in any shape and size that you want. They are a really nice little vintage touch to any look that you're trying to create. And as I say, I will be showing you how to add these lace trims on in the next video and decorate, but it's really up to you whether you want to watch that. And I've really enjoyed doing this, and if you have any questions or you want to show me what you've done, please do. I'd love to see, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye guys.